Hey, I want to thank you for watching my video today. Today I want to continue our series on how to study the Bible. So far we've looked at 3 different things in 2 different videos about how to study the scriptures. We started off by looking at the first 2 things, which is 1, discovering a translation that is easy for us to understand, because it is useless to try to study the Bible or to read the Bible if we can't understand what we're reading. And then secondly, we need to develop a plan of action, because the reality is that reading the Bible is like exercise. Unless we develop a plan and stick to that plan, we will fail. So we need to have a plan in place of a time and a place where we're going to study the scriptures each and every day, so that then we can begin to build the discipline of studying and reading the scriptures. Last week I talked to you about context. The reality is you can't truly understand what a passage is telling us unless you first understand what the context of the passage is saying. You can read a passage out of context and it will have a totally different meaning than how the passage reads when read into the context that is in the passage. We discussed that last week, and we talked about how we need to understand that all of the scriptures, all 66 books, are a unified message about Jesus Christ and about God's love and work with man and women and children. And so as we go into a passage, we need to read it within the context. The immediate context is most important, and that is we need to ask these 3 questions. Who wrote it? Who was it written to? And what was the purpose for the author to write the book? And when we understand those 3 things, we can understand the context of the passage, what the writer is saying to us today when we understand those 3 questions that he contemplated when he wrote the book. Today, though, I want to go on and talk about actually studying the scriptures. See, the reality is most of us probably just read the scriptures, and we read it quickly, and we decide we're going to read chapter 5 of John, and we want to sit down and do it at one time, and so we quickly read it, or we quickly listen to it on the Bible app. I think there's great benefit in doing that, but I think it's also important that we take time to study the passages. And how do we study the passages? Well, we need to read it slowly. See, one of the things that I will tell you that I've learned in my life is that when I read passages slowly, when I take my time in reading the passage, God speaks in a greater way than I ever will hear him speak when I'm reading it quickly, when I'm giving it a peripheral reading. But when you take the time to slowly read and dig into the passage, there is so much we can learn and so much God wants to say to us within the passages we're reading. So we need to read the passage slowly. And then the second thing is we need to ask questions. And specifically, I want to tell you today 2 questions that we can ask when reading the scriptures that will help us to study and to understand the scriptures much better, and will help us in our growth in our walk with Jesus Christ. The first question is, does this passage tell me something about God's character? Or what does this passage tell me about God's character? So as we read the passage, we read it slowly and we begin to try to decipher, is this passage specifically telling me something about God and his character? And then, secondly, the question is, what is God trying to tell me in this passage? And again, that takes time. That takes the willingness to slowly go through it, because God will begin to reveal to you what he wants you to know in that passage. I can share with you that I have read some passages hundreds, maybe even thousands of times. And when I read that passage slowly, as I study it, maybe for a sermon or maybe just for my individual study, I discover that when I do that, God begins to speak to me in ways that I had never noticed before. I will see things in that passage that I had never discovered in it before, because God speaks through his word. So if we take the time to slowly read the scriptures, we give God time to speak to us in the passage. So I encourage you not only to begin a reading plan of reading the scriptures, but to actually take the time to slowly read and study the scriptures. Because then you will have God begin to speak to you. And man, what a powerful thing that is when God begins to speak to you in the scriptures. So I encourage you to read it slowly. I encourage you to ask the 2 questions that I gave to you today. But I also encourage you to join us this Sunday here at the Way Community Church, which meets at at our house, we're going to not just look at those 2 questions, but there are 3 other questions for a total of 5 questions that can help us to dig deeper into the scriptures, to have a greater sense of knowledge of what the scriptures are saying and what God is telling us in this passage. So I hope that you'll come and join us this Sunday at 10 a.m. at our house, and you can learn with the rest of us as we discover all 5 of the questions that we can use to study the scriptures more deeply. If you're watching this video online today, I encourage you, whether it be YouTube or Facebook, to like and to subscribe to our channel, or to join the Way Community Church on Facebook so that you won't miss any videos, and so that by doing the like, you help to spread that video on to other people. Feel free to share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. And again, I look forward to seeing you this Sunday.